Welcome to the Project Endure podcast, the place where we talk about life, endurance, persistence, perspective, and so much more. I'm Joe Rinaldi, and I'll be your host. Let's jump in. Welcome back to the Project Endure podcast. It is episode 6. We have myself, Joe Rinaldi, and a very special guest in Mississippi, Grace Williams. Grace, how are you?
I'm doing great. Glad to be here. Thank you for having me. Like you said, it's a long time coming, and glad we can make it work.
I'm so happy we're making this happen. Yeah, I've been trying to get Grace on a podcast for a while now. It's been back and forth. Life's been busy, but we're here. And so I feel like the best way to start, Grace, is like if you were in an elevator stuck with me for a minute and I didn't know anything about you, how would you introduce yourself?
Okay, this wasn't one of the questions I was prepared for. So I think I would just say, hey, my name is Grace. And then I would say that I coach fitness. I'm a personal trainer. I coach women, and I also love working out. So I think I would say that.
Beautiful. Beautiful. All right. Well, hey, let's jump into the tough stuff. So I sent Grace a few questions, and if you've been listening to the podcast, you know that there are really 4 main questions that I try to get to at some point throughout the conversation. And I have the pleasure of knowing a little bit of Grace's story and knowing Grace through the BPN Ambassador Program. And so I'm going to pretend like I don't know anything about your story, and I'm just going to ask you, what is the hardest thing or circumstance that you've ever had to handle?
So first of all, I like all of these questions, by the way. Like, these are great questions to ask. So I was thinking about this last night, and I could really say like 2 things like equally. So I'll like talk about both of them. But of course, so for everyone who doesn't know me, I was married. I was in an abusive marriage. And that situation was very, very hard. And then not just that, but the entire process of leaving and like getting a divorce and closing all of that was also challenging because I got married when I was 19. So you're already so young. And when you are being manipulated emotionally or physically and emotionally abused by someone, like controlled, who's older than you, it's very hard to get away from that, I think. And especially when you're so sure that this person is like, without them, you're nothing. Like, you'll never be anything because that's what they're telling you. So believing that and choosing to walk away from that was very challenging, like to get myself to actually do it. But after I did, it was like I had already more in that relationship. But throughout that process, I was just talking to my friend about how going back, I usually don't think about like those times at all because they were so horrible. But when I do, and I think about myself, I would wake up every single day and I would be so positive about that day, even though it was awful. Like, my life was awful. I didn't go anywhere. Like, I didn't see anyone. The only person that I saw every day was this person who was the worst. And I just remember waking up being like, this is going to be a great day. And I would like get up and get dressed and be crushed. But like, how can you do that every day for over a year, honestly, over a month? But it's just mind blowing. So I would like definitely go back and hug myself because that was very challenging. And then another thing I was going to say is that, so I didn't want to just talk about that because I feel like I don't want to give him any more credit than he already has, in my story. And then the other half was, so when I did get pregnant, I was also 19. So I got married and then I also got pregnant when I was 19. And I already look pretty young. Like right now I'm 24 and people sometimes think that I'm like 17 or 18. So imagine like actually 19-year-old Grace, I already look so young. And I feel like nobody talks about this, but whenever you're a girl and you're pregnant, like visibly, and you're young, when you go out in like public and around even your family, your peers, like some people are disgusted by you, like genuinely like repulsed almost. Like they just, I can't even describe it. And already when you're pregnant, you feel so isolated and you're emotional, whatever. But it was just on a new level of having all these people think they had like a say in what you were doing and have a say in that they already knew who you were just based off of that. And it was just very, very weird. And I think I was actually reading the book Relentless. I'm reading the book Relentless right now. And I also read Winning. And he talks about having this dark side. And I think for the longest time when I started doing endurance type like running, my dark side, I'd say, was this anger that I had built up, which he talks about is like not what your actual dark side is. So getting like doing physical activity from emotion can be like great, but the problem is that you can't control emotion, and sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. It's just dangerous. It's like opening a can of worms that you can't control. Like, you don't want to tap into negative emotion. Like, you don't want to use that. And I realized that my like sentence, like the dark side, like my, I guess like the backbone of what I do was all of the people who told me, like to my face and around me. And these are people that were my friends or literally family members to this day, who were just like, wow, what a shame. Like, we're so disappointed. Like, she just threw her life away. Like, she'll never be anything. Like, her future is ruined. And like genuinely mean that, you know?
Wow.
And I just always think about that. So I think that that situation was also very hard for me to come out of. And so I would say like both of those equally are the hardest things that I've overcome.
Yeah, wow. Thank you so much for sharing. And honestly, the part about the pregnancy is something that, I mean, obviously as a guy, that's not something I'll go through ever, but I just something I never thought of, but I could imagine how people might treat or look at you differently. And it's shocking that people would even say things in
Yeah.
front of you or to you. That blows my mind. I mean, and you were so well, let's rewind just a little bit. So you talked about waking up every day positive, like it's going to be a good day, and then getting crushed were the words that you used. What do you think was the internal force or an external force that allowed you to be so positive, even though day after day it wasn't working out?
I think that, um, so I definitely think that, you know, God had a role in this.
Mm.
However, like I grew up Christian, I've always been a Christian. However, I feel like my relationship with God genuinely didn't start until probably almost in December. It will be 2 years ago. Of course, I still prayed, but I don't specifically remember being like praying every night that it gets better. So, although I'm sure he had a role, like I know he brought me out of that situation, I think in my head, what I was telling myself, and this is going to like feed into another question that you're going to ask later, but it's like it was a survival technique. Like, genuinely, in order to survive that situation, I had to tell myself that. Like, that was my thing that got me up. And I also, like, when you're growing up, I'm sure you have these thoughts too, but like, you want a family, you know, you want a family, you want kids, you want a husband, and you want to make this little life and like the Christmas card and all this stuff. And I wanted that to be me so badly. And I wanted, so I was like, I'll just put in the work. Like, I want this, I want this, I want this family, like this thing you dream about. And so I think that's what it was that like internal dream and the survival, like a literal brainwash almost that I had to do for myself
Yeah,
to get
wow.
out of that.
Yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, since it's part of your story and it's part of my story as well. I mean, looking back at the faith component and your relationship with God, I mean, I can look back at my life and it's funny, you know, I have this line that I've just developed over time because I've told my story so much is that I stopped chasing God, but he never stopped chasing me. And there was a season of life, right, where it's like he can't care about me if this is all happening, right? But you come to find out sooner or later that he does. And so for you, as you look back, I mean, can you make sense of things through the lens of faith, or are you still trying to put the pieces together as to why all of this happened?
So I think that I definitely know that everything happened like for my purpose now, that I had to go through that to be who I am today and to be able to impact so many different people because my story is so like multifaceted. So I do know that it's for a reason, you know, and um, I trust that it's all going to have like a greater purpose. Like it already has. It's already done great things for me. And I wouldn't be who I was today without it. However, there's like those moments, those bad days where we all spiral down the rabbit hole. And I'm like, at the end of the day, like, I'm so thankful. Like, thank you for pulling me out. Thank you for allowing me to do this. But why me? Like, why can't I just be normal? Why couldn't I just have a normal life and be like, why couldn't I just graduate college with everybody else? And you know what I mean? So I think, but that is like I think now that I'm talking about it, it makes me think of like worldly things versus your like spiritual and like heavenly things. And we all have those little moments, you know, but we're still on the track. So I do definitely, without a doubt, especially with the amount of women that have approached me and just that I've been able to approach, and also like the fact that I got Zoe out of that situation is enough. Like that alone was all for a purpose. So I'm sure like as I grow up, it will be even more revealed. But there are pieces of me when I have bad days where I'm like, why though?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure if you know this about me, but I absolutely love quotes. And I've said this quote probably on almost every single podcast I've ever been on. But Christine Kane once said, sometimes when you're in a dark place, you think you've been buried, but you've actually been planted. And
Ooh,
and it's this interesting concept because if you take a rock and you put it underground, it's surrounded by dirt and soil. It's in a dark place. And if you take a seed and put it underground, it's also in a dark place. But the difference between the rock and the seed is that the seed has life inside of it. And you can take that in so many different directions. But I think for people like you and I, that life inside of us is the faith that we have and in a higher power in God. And so I think it's so cool that your story is unfolding to a point now where you're starting to make sense of it, but you still have so much more ahead of you. And it's going to be amazing to watch it unfold. You've already done some really cool stuff with your story. And so tell me about the Self-Love Club and like why that started and how that started and what it is.
yes. Okay. So Self-Love Club, which I think is a part of my, you know, purpose and like a part of all of this anyway, actually came to me when I was still in that relationship. And I had just started getting into fitness and I just started getting my personal trainer certification. And to be honest, like I already said that these moments were the hardest of my whole life. So it's kind of interesting to look back and be like, Self-Love Club did not come from a place that I felt that way about myself. And I think that's where it stemmed from. And when I would go to the gym and I was able to like lift heavy weight, that was my only goal. Like I wanted to lift heavy weight. I wanted to be strong. And that gave me so much confidence. And looking back on it, I really think that doing that, although of course, after I left that relationship, I was dealing with a lot of, you know, like self-esteem and all that. However, I think that going to the gym and taking care of myself with that mindset helped me save whatever I could of myself. And like learning how to really take care of myself in that aspect helped me so much in that moment, but also on the other side. And I just remember being in that moment thinking like of how independent I felt at the gym. And I was like, I want other girls to feel like this too. And that's how Self-Love Club started. And yeah, so I just started doing it. And that was 4 years ago. And it was this, like, I just put it on my Instagram, hey, I'm looking for 4 girls. And at this time it was 2 months. It was like a workout program that I would make for them. And I had 4 girls that did it for free. And then I like shortened it. And then it's been through so many changes, but that's where it started. Just the fact that I wanted other girls to feel like I felt and know that the gym and fitness doesn't have to be about like that constrictive, restrictive, oh, I can't gain weight. Like gaining weight is bad and all this kind of stuff. It can be fun. It can be empowering. And that's important. So
Yeah,
that's where it came from.
that's such an amazing message. And I think anybody who's ever been to the gym and done something hard and then has had that feeling afterwards of like, hey, I just did that, I feel good. I think they understand why you started Self Love Club, even if they haven't been through that place exactly where you've been through. And I think that, I mean, it leads so well into this next question, which is one of the things I love is doing hard things on purpose. And, you know, people who know me think that I'm a little odd, my wife included. I mean, I take cold showers. I wake up at 3 a.m. Like I do crazy stuff. And I do it all because I feel like it makes me more resilient, more consistent. It makes me a better person. It helps me show up for myself. So for you, what is the hardest thing that you've ever done on purpose?
Well, you just mentioned cold showers, and I wasn't even thinking about that, but I would just like to add that to the list. But I was thinking about this, and so I started getting into running after I left that situation, that relationship, and I would say half marathons. Like, and I think I've done 3 or 4 now, and all of them, like even the one I was most prepared for, like this most recent one, that like it's so mental and physical. And I just feel like everyone gets to that point where they're like, literally just keep moving your legs, like just one step, one step, one step, and you have like 4 miles to go. And it's so like, I love that, but that is the hardest thing I've ever been through, you know? So physically, that I've signed myself up for, which I will again, I'm sure. It's just like, but it's great.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that I love about running personally is when you do get to that point where your legs hurt, your lungs burn, your body just wants to stop, it becomes this opportunity to dig just a little bit deeper and to tap into that other person deep inside of you that can just take one more step over and over and over again. And I think that translates to life. And that's one of the main reasons I love the world of endurance. And so as you get into the half marathon scene, and maybe you'll do more down the road, maybe a full, who knows, maybe an ultra, maybe you'll run the Leadville 100 someday, who knows?
Don't wish that on me, okay?
But, you know, when you think of the word endurance, what comes to mind in terms of a definition or a thought?
So I was thinking about this question a lot, and I'm kind of like going to address it reverse, because I think most people think of endurance as an effort for a long period of time that they have to, like, you know, just get through, you know. And when I think about endurance now, I think of the days that are my most challenging days, you know, where you don't want to get up, like you genuinely don't care, like you just, like you don't want to like do your day, you don't want to show up, you don't want to go to your job, you don't want to get dressed, you don't want to make coffee, like those small things, you don't care, you know, those days where you're completely drained, but you get up anyway, and then you have another day just like that, and then another day just like that. To me, like true endurance is enduring the worst, like, you know what I'm talking about, like your lowest for a long period of time, and that could be a question mark. And so it kind of, I guess, ties into like resilience, but to me endurance is about doing something extremely difficult for a long period of time. It's not just about the length of the effort that makes it challenging, it's that it's a hard effort that you're also holding for a hard amount of time, if that makes sense.
Oh, it makes complete sense. And as you were talking, I had this quote pop into my head and I had to pull it up here. It's by, and I'm going to butcher this last name, Marianne Radmacher.
Okay.
Anyway, she said, courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes courage is the little voice at the end of the day that says, I'll try again tomorrow. And I feel like a lot of times people picture endurance or bravery or courage as this big thing where you're running 100 miles or you're taking on this big task, you're leaving your job. But I think more often than not, courage and bravery and endurance happen on those days where we don't want to get out of bed. We don't want to do what we have to do. We maybe get sucked back into that dark place. And so as those things happen to you, I think one of the things I appreciate about you the most is that you're so open about them on social media. And so for you, is that almost an outlet that you use, or is that another act of bravery where you just want other people to know that they're not alone?
So I think that, of course, I'm a people person. I'm very passionate about other people. But when I'm going through and I talk about what I'm going through, I think that it stems from the fact that I feel responsible, that I have to show up for someone. Like I need to show up and express how I feel because someone probably feels like I feel. Um, and so it just comes from like, okay, I have to show up, but like I literally don't even want to. And so that's where it comes from. So I feel like for myself, it's actually funny that Instagram or my business through social media has grown because, and now I'm like using it as like my business because personally, like if I did not do this, I would be one of those people that did not have Instagram. Like, I'm like one of those people that's like, I'm leaving my phone here. I don't want to bring it. Like, I don't want to do that. But people never know that because I'm so active on social media. But so I don't think it's like an outlet for myself more so that it is I am responsible for other people, other women. You know what I mean? If I'm going to sit here and empower women, I can't just sit here and empower women on the days that I'm like, hey, everyone, like, this is a great day. You know, it's throughout the whole process. And I think that comes transparency because Instagram, I was listening to another podcast and they were talking about how no matter how transparent you are on Instagram, Instagram will never be you. Like a internet profile can never imitate you. And so for the people like you and I who are transparent, think about the people who aren't.
Yeah.
And it's completely fabricated. And there's so many of them out there that other people are feeding into this, oh, well, my life should look like this. And like, I'm just not happy. And like, there's something wrong with me.
Yeah.
And I don't think that. And I just like want to be one of those people that's very real. And you know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. And I would ask you, you know, when you're going through social media, because I think we become the content that we consume, and that could go for the food you eat, it can go for the people you surround yourself with, the things you're looking at, the things you're reading. And so on social media, I mean, do you find it hard to shelter and protect yourself from some of the negativity or some of the things that maybe you don't want to be around, but for one reason or another, you're forced to kind of confront on social media?
I think absolutely. And it's kind of interesting because I don't really usually go on Instagram. Like when I do get on Instagram, it's to post and it's to interact with honestly like VPN people,
Yeah.
like the ambassadors show up for everyone else that is my community online. But I think that more so than it is these like fictional people, it's the people that I meet in like my physical life that I can't escape from. Like, you know what I mean? Like the toxic little circles of like who's doing what and feeling like you need to know what's like, you know what I mean? That is hard because it's like I can shield myself and like unfollow or whatever. But then they're like, you're on social media. Why aren't you? You know what I mean? And so you're like trapped in this like circle. So I think, yeah, it definitely is hard. Or if I'm going through something and it involves that, like a community here, then anything I talk about on my platform, like it's just like this back and forth thing. So I definitely do feel that way. However, every time I go to a BPN trip, like the Ambassador Weekend, when I got back on Instagram and I was like scrolling,
Mm-hmm.
it made me see it through a new lens. And I just realized how many people that I follow that are not like just consuming empty, like my time, you know what I mean? Just like a waste. And so things like that, I think really help getting around the right people and the right community can help you put that in perspective.
Yeah, I mean that weekend down in Texas was unreal, and it was so incredible how everybody was the same person that you saw online, right? Like
Yeah.
Tony Reyes, who I had on episode 4, he just like booming voice, like big presence came in, and like, oh man, it was unreal. But
Yes.
but you know what, Grace, you know, I think one of the things, not to backtrack, but that I want to ask you about is on social media, I think sometimes it could be hard when we just want a day or 2 days or 3 days or a break, right? Because you might feel that pressure. I know I do, right? To be present, to show up. So I know that you've taken short breaks, right? from social media. Tell us maybe a little bit more about those, and like, what was the tipping point that made you realize like, hey, I need to take a step back, collect my thoughts, and then move forward again?
Okay. Well, I know that Megan from BPN, who works there now, she had mentioned before that Sundays she does not get on social media at all. And so I kind of like didn't really strictly enforce that on myself. But I did see Saturday and Sunday kind of as just like, and I think what you're talking about, like that pressure is is the pressure of, okay, well, the algorithm says this, and the algorithm, you have to clear out your stories, and your first story has to be actionable, and then you have to show your face, and you have to talk, and then you have to post the reels, and like all of this stuff. And so on Saturday and Sunday, I'm like, these are my fun stories. Like, these are like whenever I want to post, it doesn't have to be actionable. Like, this is just fun. And so it was fine. But the tipping point was just that I was dealing with I was just in a horrible spot, and it was just unbearable. And I was like, I can't. And I was pretty transparent repeatedly, just that I've been in a tough spot, but it just got to the point where it was like, I'm trying so hard to like keep showing up and keep doing this when I need to show up for myself so badly. And I need to take a step and kind of reground. And actually I had just gone through something really horrible. This is at the beginning of September, really horrible, with like some friends that I had here. And it was a really, really, really challenging. Like, it just recently, I feel like I've been having like really good days, but it was a very hard experience, and it was very toxic. And it was like, these people, I have to see them. I have to see them in person. And then I would see them over here, and then I would see them over here. And it was just making it worse. And so I was like, I need to take a step back and just focus on myself, just do the things that I want to do. And like I said, kind of like clean slate, like reground myself and, okay, let's take a look. And honestly, I would encourage anyone, because I learned a lot from just changing my perspective a little bit on why I do the things that I do. Like, if you didn't have your phone, what would you be doing? And like, what do you enjoy? And I think that's also why I started cooking. Like, recently I started cooking more. Like, what are your hobbies? And it does, like, not scrolling on Pinterest, not TikTok, physically, what are you doing? And so that, it was like rediscovering, I guess, things that I enjoy. And that's just like a whole other rabbit hole, I think, that you could go down, because I just went through this. I just watched Zoe play so much. And she's 4. She doesn't have a phone. She sees her friends at school. They don't call me to talk to Zoe. You know what I mean? Like, Zoe's like off the grid. She's so joyful, like, when she's doing anything. So playing, like painting, coloring, running around, whatever. She's so intentional and invested in what she's doing. And it made me think about, like, on a simple level, we all should be doing that. And that's so, like, I just think a part of our lives that can be taken away if you're not careful about it with your phone. And then another thing, then I'll stop talking about this, is at the end of your life, when you're dead or you're about to die, and you're thinking about all of these things that you've done. Like, if you don't have any hobbies, what does that look like? If you don't, and it's not like a hobby you're trying to get good at. Like, we're talking like needle, like, sewing something, or like making clay, or like painting, like, you know what I mean? Those small things are your life. Yeah. Like, so it's just wild to me that, and it's sad, honestly, that sometimes people don't do that. Sometimes people will go through maybe half their life, like 50 years old, and realize that they don't do anything they actually like doing. Yeah. So I think it was a good self-discovery and healing for myself.
Yeah, that was such a great answer. And I have a few thoughts. I mean, one is this thing called the paradox principle of freedom, which says that easy short-term decisions lead to hard long-term consequences, and hard short-term decisions lead to easy long-term consequences. And I think that being on our phones and getting sucked into the world of social media is an easy short-term decision, right? It's almost instinct. I mean, I cannot tell you how many times I tell myself I'm not going to pick up my phone, and 10 seconds later, I'm on my phone. Instagram is open, and I don't know how I got there. And so I think that intentionality and fighting that urge and And pushing into that resistance a little bit, that's a hard short-term decision. But the other side of that is now we have time to actually be present and to interact with our physical environment, be present with the people who we care about. And at the end of the day, that's what matters. You're absolutely right. And, I'm giving a speech in a couple weeks to a middle school here in Philadelphia. And I'm not sure if this part that I'm about to talk about is a little too dark, but I'm going to say it here. I think I want to make the background on my phone. It's this Latin phrase, and it says memento mori. And that translates to remember you die. And I think it just, every time I see that or think about that concept is like, I know people who have passed away at a young age. I was in a car accident that almost took my life when I was in my early 20s. Like, it can all be over in a second. And if I'm spending, according to my iPhone, I spend like 6 to 8 hours a day on my iPhone. It's, that's not how I want to spend life when tomorrow's not guaranteed. And so I think that's such a valid topic to talk about on this podcast. And I really loved what you had to say. So, as someone who aspires to be a parent someday, I would imagine that having a child is probably also up there in terms of like the hardest thing that you could possibly do as a human being, not just physically having a child, but raising a child, I should say.
Yeah.
Right. And they're both hard. But when it comes to Zoe, the final question that I like to ask on this podcast, and I feel like we can go on forever and we still have some room to run here, but is if someone listening to this podcast was in a really hard place right now, maybe they were feeling discouraged, down, maybe even hopeless, what would you say to them? And that's what I would usually ask, but I'm going to ask it to you in a little bit of a different, with a spin. And that's, someday Zoe is in a really hard situation and life has just handed her something that she didn't see coming, and she is distraught and upset and doesn't know what to do or where to turn. And she comes to you, right? Based on your experience and your view of the world, what do you say to her when that happens?
Okay, well, first of all, this is making me very emotional. Like, I don't know why. Whenever you talked about Zoe, I was like, because you were, we'll talk about that in a second. But this is actually, it's the same answer because, and you're going to like this because I didn't know you liked quotes, but it is literally a quote from my grandmother who told me this once, and I will literally never forget it. And it reminds me of like getting through that relationship that I said was the hardest time of my life. And I don't know how I did it. And she told me that you can actually survive anything you need to survive for any amount of time that you need to survive it. And it's kind of morbid because, like how I said that, it could be question mark. Like it could be a year, it could be 7, of horrible like times, but you can survive it. And I think the trick is like, you have to convince yourself that you have to survive it. Like you are a survivor, and, so that's what I would tell her, that you can survive any bad thing for any amount of time that you have to. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. Sorry if I made you emotional. I've already made a few people cry on this podcast and we're only 6 episodes in. So
that's great.
But so as you look forward, Grace, you've got the Self-Love Club going. You're currently training people in person. Is that correct?
So on Self-Love Club, it's all virtual.
Okay.
So it's just workout programming and nutrition coaching.
Gotcha.
And then the cool thing about Self-Love Club is that they're all together. So all of my clients are like in a group together, which I feel like makes it that like extra sprinkle because they get a little community with it. But that's all online. But I'm also an Orange Theory coach right now. So that is like physical coaching. Yeah. And then I'll be stepping out of that in December. So then it'll only be virtual.
Gotcha. And you're going Self-Love Club full time?
So I'm actually doing a new job. This is something that I want to do. This is like a part of, I guess, my purpose or passion with Self-Love Club. But a big dream that I've had is that I want to make a nonprofit for single young moms. And I don't know the logistics of it, but I just know that that is something that I need to do. And so I have an uncle who is a political consultant candidate. So he just helps people with their campaigns and stuff like that. And we had dinner one night and I was asking him about this. I was like, I want to do this. I have literally no idea like where to start at all. And he was like, well, you need connections and you need money. Like, just to be honest, like you need money, you need to know people. And so I was like, okay. And so I reached out to some clients, some members who I coached in Jackson, which is the capital of Mississippi. And I knew that they worked like in the Capitol building, like the political scene. And I was like, hey, I'm thinking about moving back and I want a job in this realm. This is what I want to do. So literally, I don't care what the job is. Like, I will take out the trash. I just need to meet people. I need to be in the room. Like, I need to be able to do that. And literally, if like a job came up and whatever. So starting January, I will be in the Capitol building.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like a huge change, but I'm very excited.
That's awesome. And so this is all to make connections to eventually start the nonprofit. Gotcha. Okay. And tell us a little bit more about the nonprofit concept. I mean, how exactly would that impact young single moms? And like, do you have that vision built out for it?
So I have like different ideas and I don't know, like how I said, the logistics of each idea, because, you know, when I think about it, I'm like, all right, what is the problem? Because honestly, we could like talk, I guess we have a little bit of room, so I could just talk about it. But even though I am a single mom, my parents, like I am so fortunate and blessed that my family helps me so much. Not maybe like not necessarily financially, but sometimes financially if I need it, like, you know what I'm saying? Or if I need help with Zoe or if I need help moving, for example, I have that. However, not everyone does. And I still have health insurance through my dad. Not everyone does. It's so many things that have been like opened my eyes to, I guess, problems that are like in the system, like flaws in the system, and that this is a huge demographic, like huge. How I said, I don't think anybody talks about it. And I actually told, I was talking to Trey Freeman about this too, that it's such a low talked about thing. And in my opinion, that's because nobody speaks out about it. Like nobody comes out of that situation because it's so challenging. And so I feel like a part of me, like God bringing me out of my situation was so that I could like do this and lead other girls the best way too. So, I mean, I could go like a financial route and be like, I need to, you know, maybe my nonprofit helps them financially. Maybe my nonprofit pays for their school, but then they need childcare too. Yeah. So maybe my nonprofit pays for their childcare if they have a scholarship already. Or maybe, you know what I mean? Or maybe it does that. But then I also was thinking it could go the complete opposite direction. And I could be like, this is a workout class once a week. It's for free for single young moms. And I offer childcare. And we have a Bible study after, or we talk about mindset afterwards. So I don't know exactly like what it would look like. Honestly, I want it to be something very big that I can genuinely, you know, make a dent in that. So I'm sure that finances would have to come into play. But I just don't know the whole process of that. But I just think, like I said, throughout my experience and the things that I've gone through this journey, it's just mind blowing to me that, you know, like if I didn't have this, well, then what would I do? Like, you know, it's just scary a little bit.
Yeah. And you know, throughout both what you just spoke about, Self-Love Club, BPN, right, there's a thread of community everywhere and support. And so I'm wondering if there's somebody listening to this who maybe feels disconnected, or they don't have that community, or they don't have that support system. I mean, I'm sure you've been there before. Where would you encourage somebody to start who doesn't have those things?
Actually, it's really interesting that you just asked me this, because someone asked me this like on my story about saying that they don't have a community, basically. Yeah. And you're right. Like if there was a point that I didn't have that, and even on a level, I didn't feel that way towards my family necessarily about community because of what I'd gone through, you know? So, but then to that, I think that sometimes you have to be alone. Like sometimes the people around you aren't your community and you don't want them to be. And it's hard to see that in the moment. But now, because I didn't always have VPN, you know what I mean? You didn't always have VPN. And before that, we were just loners, you know what I mean? Like we didn't have that. And we were we made it. You know what I mean? Like, we're still okay. We still showed up. You don't realize, like, it is better to wait for the right community, which will find you when you're pursuing your passion and your purpose, than it is to settle for, like, I wish I fit in here, or I wish people would talk to me here. No, you don't. Yeah. Like, trust me, no, you don't. It's better to be alone. But I mean, also, like, Instagram has been such a great tool for me. So I think I would just be open on Instagram and, you know, make Instagram friends, make Instagram buddies, or something like that. Someone who's pursuing your similar purpose or passion. I know that anytime a girl messages me and they are saying that they just started doing this, or they're in a hard spot, we're kind of like buddies, you know what I mean? Like, social media friends. So
yeah,
half of me is like, you got to be alone sometimes. And then the other half of me is like, you can still have Instagram friends.
I think both are valid. And I will say that some of my Instagram friends are the best people I've ever met, the most supportive people I've ever met. And it's just amazing that if you're intentional with who you're trying to connect with and what you're trying to do and what you're putting out there, just what comes back to you. So I'm all for it. And, you know, as we wrap up here, I want people to know where to connect with you, where to find you. But first, I have to give credit to your dog, who out through this whole podcast, I'm pretty sure opened the blinds at one point. So kudos to your dog. What is your dog's name?
His name's Comet.
Comet. Wow, he's impressive. So first dog appearance on the podcast. Nice job, Comet.
Nailed it.
Where can people find you, Grace? What's the best place for people to go to learn more about everything that you're doing?
So you can follow me on Instagram. I'm most active on Instagram. It's Coach Grace. And then also on TikTok, I'm pretty active on there as well. It's Coach Grace. And then sometimes I make YouTube videos, which is also linked on my Instagram. But I would say Instagram is the number one. Message me if you need to talk.
Awesome. Well, you heard it here. If you need anything, reach out to Grace. And Grace, thank you so much for this. It was incredible. I learned a lot, and I know the people did too. If you enjoyed this episode of the Project Indoor podcast, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review on your platform of choice, and share this episode with a friend. It helps us get more conversations like this out to more people like you. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time. Oh, and one more thing. If you're looking for a community of people all striving to be better together, check out the Project Indoor Hard Things Club. The link is in the description below. We'd love to have you.